Vamos a comenzar la segunda parte de la sesión de hoy, ¿no? Que en parte podemos retomar un poco con la última vinculación que nos ha hecho Bruno Pomara cuando le preguntaba sobre los moriscos. Decía, bueno, moriscos que van a un territorio, es decir, los albaneses van de un territorio musulmán hacia un territorio cristiano, ¿no? Que están intentando pedir eso, ¿no? En el caso de los moriscos que analiza más bien Yunus, es lo contrario, son comunidades que están cristianizadas, muchos de ellos por la fuerza, pero van a un territorio musulmán, en este caso al Imperio Otomano. Yunus Dogan, como os decía antes, al principio de la conferencia, está en estos momentos, acaba de terminar de escribir su tesis doctoral en el Instituto Universitario Europeo de Florencia, muchos de nosotros nos hemos doctorado y que quizá Pablo os habrá hablado si estáis interesados, aquellos que queréis investigar en el futuro también de poder investigar ahí. Él es, por lo tanto, un doctor en ciernes en el Instituto Europeo, pero él se licenció en la Universidad de Bilkent, en Ankara, en Historia Europea. Todo eso pone lo que he visto. Historia medieval europea, más o menos, es lo principal, historia medieval. Y luego, prácticamente, bueno, luego ya fuiste directamente al Instituto Europeo y es especialista más o menos en historia del Mediterráneo, en los siglos XV y XVI, también historia diplomática, historia de las relaciones entre Moriscos e Imperio Otomano, y la tesis doctoral que él va a defender pronto, bajo la dirección de Giancarlo Casale, un profesor de ahí, del Instituto Europeo, se titula A Story to be Told, Entangled Histories Between the Moriscos and the Ottoman State in the Mediterranean, 1520-1620, y yo creo que en parte una de las cuestiones, él va a utilizar un PowerPoint en castellano, a pesar de las letritas del Collaborate Ultra, esto es lo que tenemos, pero nos va a dar la conferencia en inglés, sabéis que aquí podéis, y luego le podéis preguntar en castellano, en italiano, si queréis también, en inglés o en lo que prefiráis. ¿De acuerdo? Así que tienes la palabra, Yunus.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. My presentation, I prepared it in Spanish, but to speak 1 hour Spanish, I need practice, so I'm gonna continue with English, but we can, in the question part, we can speak Spanish, English, Italian. So today I'm gonna present mainly the main argument of my thesis, which is gonna cover Moriscos and Ottoman Empire relation from Spain. Then it will take us to France, Italy, North Africa, and we are gonna end up in Istanbul if we have time for that. What I try to explain today is the central paradox of Moriscos experience, because these were the people who lived between empires, between faiths, between identities. They were baptized Christian in Spain, but suspected Muslim. They were subject of Spanish crown, but petitioners to the Ottoman Sultan. They were stateless exiles who managed to become part of diplomacy and mobility in the Mediterranean. But in my thesis, I try to say that Moriscos and Ottoman relation was a century long that benefit for both parties, and Moriscos were not passive exiles, but they were active agents, part of the Mediterranean diplomacy, Mediterranean mobility, and interconnectedness. So I try to explain Moriscos as a trans-imperial actors who managed to become part of Ottoman diplomacy, Ottoman mobility, and who transformed from Spanish subject to the Ottoman subject. If we have time, I will explain this in 2 parts. In the first part, we are going to focus on 16th century, more or less, Alpujarras Rebellion and Moriscos' main contact with Ottoman authorities. I don't want to say direct Ottoman Empire, because what they contacted was like households in Ottoman state, with Kılıç Ali Pasha, Grand Admiral, with Grand Vizier Sokulu Mehmet Pasha, with Sheikhul Islam, which is the religious authority, and with Sultan directly. Later, I'm gonna try to explain Moriscos as spy for Ottoman authorities. In the second part, we are gonna focus on expulsion period, their passage from France, Italy, and Ottoman Empire. Later, their conversion, settlement, and identity in Ottoman capital Istanbul. And if we have time, I will briefly mention about their settlement in Anatolia, Thessaloniki. And we will finish with that, hopefully. So first, I want to give a brief background, because Moriscos' connection with Ottoman wasn't only their only attempt to find diplomatic or military support. They started with North African authorities, later with Mamluks, but later during the reign of Sultan Bayezid, Moriscos and Jews from Spain, they settled to Istanbul. A letter from Spanish archive from 1493 indicated 270 Muslims from Granada, they arrived to Istanbul. This was the first settlement that later will become one of the main aspects between Christian, Jewish population in Istanbul and Moriscos. The situation began to shift direction under the Sultan Süleyman when Barbarossa became part of Ottoman admiral, and with his support, Moriscos started to connect with Ottoman Empire step by step. Their letter to Sultan Süleyman indicate that they refer to him as Caliph of Muslims and the Sultan of Sea and Land. But in this era, they are still connecting to North African authorities and Barbarossa brothers. Through them, they try to reach Istanbul. But the key shift, which is important, come under the Selim II and his successor, when Moriscos' appeal reached the highest authorities in Ottoman state, which is Grand Vizier, Grand Admiral, and Sheikh al-Islam. And this marked the beginning of Moriscos' entry into the world of imperial Mediterranean diplomacy, politics, identity, belonging, and strategies. In the thesis, I call all of them as Moriscos strategies, which is including diplomacy, intelligence, identity, or belonging. If we look at the 16th century, we are looking for two parts of the Mediterranean. In Spain, the Pragmatica by Philip II, prohibition of Arabic, destruction of Moriscos culture, and this led to the Moriscos rebellion in Alpujarras. They claim Hernando de Córdoba as their king, but the rebellion ended in 1571. If we look at the same period in Eastern Mediterranean, Ottomans were preparing for a siege, and Ottoman Divan was divided between two fractions of power. On the one side, Grand Admiral and Beylerbey of Algiers, Kılıç Ali Pasha and Sokol Mehmet Pasha were supporting to send Ottoman Armada to Granada to have Moriscos. On the other side, Piyale Pasha or Lala Pasha, which is the advisor of Sultan Selim, were supporting an expedition to the Cyprus. In this perspective, Moriscos found themselves between center of this fraction. So their appeal was not directed to the Ottoman state or whole authorities. They were connected with the authorities that they support their cause. In this period, they already start to appeal to Ottoman authorities and Kılıç Ali Pasha. For example, Manuel Kazbakar tells that Fernando Abaki, he traveled to Algiers, recruited 400 soldiers from Kılıç Ali Pasha in order to bring them to Spain, and their commander was a Muslim Janissary named Hussein, because later he created some problem in Spain among the Moriscos as well. At the same time, they started sending representatives to Şeyhülislam Ebu Suud Efendi and the Grand Vizier Sokolu Mehmet Pasha. For example, Venetian sources and Spanish ambassador also indicate that, for example, Morisco Ibrahim Granatino appealed to Sokolu Mehmet Pasha, which Italian documents describe him one of the favorite person that Sokolu Mehmet Pasha was supporting, although they believe that he was also a spy. We have 4 documents from Ottoman archive that indicate that Sultan were already informed by Moriscos and by Kılıç Ali Pasha regarding their situation. However, the Ottoman never sent a huge armada to Spain because Sultan Selim and the other authorities, they decided to go with Cyprus, and during that period, during Alparas rebellion, Ottomans were preparing for the siege of Cyprus, so they never sent main Ottoman armada to Granada. However, they sent help through Algiers, which we are gonna discuss later. But this period, Moriscos appeals did not end, they just transformed into different aspects. So the main part is Moriscos' interaction with Kılıç Ali Pasha. It was an interaction that when Moriscos were getting help from Kılıç Ali Pasha also used Moriscos for his expansion of North Africa. For example, the documents indicate that Kılıç Ali Pasha sent 400 soldiers to Granada. They create a line of intelligence between Algiers, Spain, Granada, Valencia, and Istanbul. Kılıç Ali Pasha constantly sent information regarding the situation of Moriscos to Istanbul in order to request money and military equipment for Western Mediterranean. So his main aim to create a powerful armada in Western Mediterranean, at the same time to support Moriscos rebellion in order to divert Habsburg power to Spain.
Sorry. I realized. It's okay.
So as I said, he had 2 main aims. One, to create a strong armada in Western Mediterranean, at the same time to divert Habsburg energy or sources into Moriscos rebellion, so he could move freely in Mediterranean, it was the exact moment when Habsburg were dealing with Moriscos rebellion. Kılıç Ali Pasha temporarily occupied Tunisia in 1570. Later, he brought many Moriscos from Granada to recruit to settle them in Tunis and Bizerta after his temporary occupation in Tunisia. As I said, for example, this is an order to Kılıç Ali Pasha regarding the Moriscos from Sultan Selim II. And in the beginning of letter, Sultan said that to Kılıç Ali Pasha, you inform me that Moriscos in this situation, they need help, they need this. So basically, Kılıç Ali Pasha was feeding Ottoman authorities with information regarding the Moriscos in order to get enough military support, both for Western Mediterranean and also for Moriscos. If we come to Grand Vizier Sokolu Mehmet Pasha and their relation with Moriscos, it's much bigger picture. Because at this point, Sokolu Mehmet Pasha was trying to expand Ottoman power, Ottoman Empire through soft power policy. Instead of conquering many lands or going to war, from Sumatra to Granada, Sokolo Mehmed Pasha tried to make connection with all the Muslims under Spanish and Portuguese Empire in order to support them, in order to create an Ottoman influence in that period. For example, in 1577-2, he sent one representative to Granada in order to contact with Moriscos, and one representative to Sumatra in order to contact with the Muslims under the Portuguese Empire. Of course, this was Sokolo Mehmed Pasha's politic, but at the same time, it was also, for Moriscos, it was opportunity to appeal. For example, Fray Diego de Mallorca indicated that Moriscos of Valencia and Aragon, they sent representatives to Istanbul, to Sokolo Mehmed Pasha, and request for a fleet to be sent to Granada, and they were willing to pay for the fleet. And Ibrahim Granatino, who we mentioned before, he personally met with the Sokolo Mehmed Pasha, and according to the documents, Mehmed Pasha already promised them that the fleet will arrive when Ottoman state had power to send it. And these are Spanish documents or Italian documents. So most of the case, we can think about that this is Spanish fear, which is not true, or maybe some rumors. But at the same time, we have Ottoman side documents which exactly say the same things, which is evident from a letter written by Sokolo Mehmed Pasha in 1574 and directly sent to people of Andalusia. The letter informed Moriscos that Ottoman state right now preparing for capture of La Goleta in Tunisia, and after this, in summer, the Sultan will send fleet to Granada in order to attack Moriscos. And in the letter, Sokolo Mehmed Pasha encouraged them to start rebelling again whenever they have power. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Yes.
So basically, he encouraged them to start rebellion whenever they have time, whenever they have power or sources. At the same time, I didn't put whole letter, but the letter say that you shall communicate with Protestant in Spain, and you should attack the enemies, which is Spanish Empire, at the same time, and you should inform each other about the situation in Spain. And also, Sokolo Mehmed Pasha, the letter indicate that when you have opportunities, send one of your men to Istanbul in order to inform us about the situation in Spain. This is the letter to people of Andalusia. At the same time, more or less around the same period, Sokolo Mehmed Pasha sent one letter to Protestant in Flanders and Spain, indicating that we already informed Moriscos about your situation and we ordered them to coordinate with Protestants. So he is mainly creating an interaction between Moriscos and Protestant at the same time in order to encourage them to rebel against Spanish Empire in 1574. And from Spanish archive, from Archivo Histórico Nacional, Inquisition report from 1576 indicated an Ottoman ambassador, the source indicated as ambassador, arrived in Aragon, who is named Yuche Duarte from Valencia, and he, through other Moriscos, traveled through Valencia, Aragon, and Zaragoza, showing the letters from Ottoman Sultan and Grand Vizier, and indicating that Ottoman will send 3 fleets, one to Denia, another to Murcia and Valencia, and third one to Barcelona under Kılıç Ali Pasha. So, so the first part of this presentation was mainly about the time of Altuara's rebellion, so from 1568 to 1574. But at the same time, this was not Moriscos' interaction with Ottoman just for military support. At the same time, they become part of intelligence operation through Ottoman agents. So during my first year of my PhD, I went to Archivo de Simancas to find some sources regarding Moriscos and Ottoman connection. My focus was mainly about Altuara's rebellion, but at the same time, I found several sources indicating how Moriscos become part of intelligence operation and how they become spy in Ottoman Empire for Ottoman authorities. So I decided to include a chapter to my thesis, which Spanish and Italian sources actually provide many documents regarding this aspect. By Moriscos, they were bilinguals, they speak Spanish, Arabic, some cases Italian, French. They could move, I don't want to say freely, but they could move between Mediterranean as Christian, as Muslim. So their double identity allowed them to operate between Christian space and Muslim space at the same time. For example, Garcia Hernandez, the acting ambassador in Venice, informed the king that many Moriscos from Aragon and Valencia passed through Venice to go to Levant, Istanbul to become Muslim, and people who came from there indicate that Ottoman authorities treat them well because they use Moriscos as soldiers, spy, or translator. Well, this was one of the main documents that I decided to continue with to find if there are many spy reports or not. I will tell a brief example of Jerónimo de Amique, which is a spy who was captured in 5052. So, through whole document, we can say that Moriscos were operating as Ottoman agents in the whole Mediterranean. Many documents from Inquisition reports from Venetian ambassadors indicate their activities. The route Granada, Algiers, Venice, Lyon, Marsilia, Sicily, Napoli. They were people between two worlds. Can act as Christian, which when we come to second part of the presentation, we will see that Venetians accept them or consider them as Christian. They could also operate in Muslim area. Jerónimo, I will just briefly mention about them. He was a Moriscos from Zaragoza who was captured in 1552. He presented himself as a Christian, but during the interrogation, he revealed his identity. And his case is not a Moriscos working for higher authorities in Ottoman Empire. A Moriscos working on a local governor in Balkan Peninsula as a spy. So he said that he was in Vlor, which is close to Albania. He was called by Süleyman Pasha, the governor of Albania. Süleyman Pasha ordered him to go to Puglia, Naples, and Gaeta to visit, see, and report everything, the condition of fortress, the garrison, the artillery, the other supplies, and inform the governor about everything. he was accompanied by two other Moriscos, which one of them Franco Aragones, and the other one Miguel Mancabo. His Muslim name is Ali. Three of them split in Valletta to complete separate mission and then to meet in Rome in order to meet another Muslim who will take them to Albania. But when he was captured, the source doesn't give information about the other two. If we categorize their activities, we can say that Moriscos were first political and social intelligence, many of them reporting on the condition of Granada, Valencia, Aragon, relying information, bringing news from Ottoman authorities in order to encourage rebellion. For example, in 1565, Spanish authorities discovered that Moriscos in Spain were transmitting information to an Ottoman agents in Lyon, who in return sending those information to Istanbul. They were also part of covert plotting. In the same year, 1565, Spanish spy discovered a network that connected Valladolid to Algiers or Thessalonica, who were sending information, money, and people through this channel. Third, which is one of the main aim of Moriscos spy, to gather intelligence on military and strategic information, mapping fortification, sending information regarding Habsburg fleet. For example, one of the documents from Spanish archive indicated El Turco. In this case, probably they are referring to Sultan or Grand Vizier because they were part of Sokullu network. Sent six Spanish spy to Malta, to La Goleta, and to Valencia. At the same time, for example, the ambassador in Vienna, Spanish ambassador in Vienna, report another incident in 1567 indicating that Sokullu Mehmed Pasha sent 7 Spanish, Valencian, and Granadan spies who were disguised as merchants in order to travel Sicily, Spain, and Germany to collect all the information regarding the Habsburg military fortification, Habsburg military sources, and report everything to Sokullu Mehmed Pasha. Some of them were acting as agents who were convincing Moriscos to move from Italy or France to Istanbul in order to become a soldier in Southern Arabia. One of them is Mehmet Çelebi, who was in Venice, Morisco from Murcia, who was operating as commercial agents, financial intermediary, and also, according to Spanish sources, as a spy. And some of them also were acting as spy for Spanish and Italian authorities as well. For example, Venetian Bailo in Istanbul, in one of his report to Venetian authorities, he say that he learned some information through a Morisco who was in Istanbul. For example, there's another case story about 3 brothers from Malaga. One of them, Alonso, who moved to Istanbul and married there and opened a shop in Galata. Fernando, he served as a soldier in La Goleta. And the third brother, Ayala, who was a scribe for Spanish governors in Tunisia. So according to Spanish sources, Ayala sent all the information he gathered about Habsburg movement, fleet, sources, sent them to Alonso, the one who in Istanbul, and Alonso meets Grand Vizier Sokulu Mehmet Pasha and Piyale Pasha and inform him about all the situation. And these are the places that Moriscos spied or sent or had been through the sources that I collected. So we can see from Istanbul to Fleur, Thessaloniki, Ragusa, Malta, Algiers, Granada, several Moriscos who were soldiers in Spanish army, they were sending information to governor of Algiers, who they were trying to convince him to send his fleet to Ibiza. And their mission was, when Ottoman fleet arrived, their mission was to set fire, everything, poison the water, and create a trouble in order to divert the Habsburg sources. Now we are going to move to second part, which how their migration become diplomatic issue between Ottoman, France, Italy. I'm not going to go into detail about the expulsion period, but what I want to say that when Moriscos, the expulsion and before and after expulsion, they managed to create a network which helped them to move through territories, to move to Istanbul. For example, they had a representative in Marsilia who can connect them to Istanbul. For example, Jerónimo Enriquez, who was a representative in Marsilia, who had personal contact with Sultan Ahmed in Istanbul. Our first step is France, and Alhamiados from 16th century already described the route that take Moriscos through France, Italy, and finally either Thessalonica or Spain. When they arrive in Venice, the document indicates that they should connect to Jews or Muslim merchants who will help them to transfer them to Thessalonica or Istanbul. Moriscos' connection with France was not new. Already before expulsion, they connected with King of France in order to convince him for military action. They first were accepted in France if they profess their Catholic faith, and they were settled in some part of France, but over time, in a couple of years, the problem starts. They faced many problems in France, and at that, French authorities decided to send Moriscos from France. This was the moment that they become a trans-imperial actors, because they knew that the moment they have problem, they can ask Ottoman Sultan for help. For example, already 1606, Moriscos meet Grand Vizier Murat Pasha in Belgrade, inform him about their situation in France and Spain, and in return, Ottoman Sultan sent a letter to France asking for safe passage for this Moriscos. But the problem increased during their expulsion. So in 69, Ottoman Sultan sent Morisco Haji Ibrahim, Muteferrika de Cairo, who moved to Istanbul, according to French ambassador, who moved to Istanbul from Spain, became a really important person in Istanbul, and at that he received the title of Muteferrika, which is a noble title in Ottoman Empire, Muteferrika de Cairo. And Sultan Ahmed sent him to Venice and France in order with letters in order to ask for safe passage. In the letter to King of France and later to Queen of France, Maria de Medici, Sultan Ahmed, first he mentioned about the long relation between France and Ottoman Empire, and indicate that he asked King of France to create safe passage for this Moriscos. And even even Ottomans wanted to have a representative, a resident in Marsilia who can supervise all this all the migration, who can record Moriscos, send them to Istanbul, which from Moriscos perspective, it will help them to arrange their transportation. From Ottoman perspective, it was one of the earliest examples that Ottomans were trying to have a residence, envoy, not ambassador, but envoy in a foreign country. And their passage through France became a diplomatic problem, become a diplomatic competition between France and Venice as well. For example, the Baron de Salignac and French ambassador in Istanbul, he constantly sent letter to King of France indicating that Moriscos in Istanbul, they are lobbying against French authorities because they had many problems and they can create problem between Supreme Court and King of France. At the same time, one of his letters, he said that Ottoman Sultan sent letter to Venetian authorities regarding the Moriscos passage, and Venetians are happily accepted. So he indicated Venetians were trying to gain favor of Sultan, so we should also do the same. So in thesis, what I try to say that even though those were stateless exiles, they become part of diplomacy which they can use between Spain, between France and Ottoman authorities. We have the same version, even much better, with Venice. So the same Alhamiado documents indicating their passage through Venice as well, indicating that you should not enter through Milano, you should go to Padua, from there to Venice, and from Venice they will transport you to Thessalonica or Istanbul. But the position of Venice was a bit tricky because it was between pressure from Madrid and from Istanbul in order to manage these Morisco issues. For Venetian authorities, one of the main problems is that Moriscos were, according to Spanish sources, Moriscos were they were integrated to Christian identity. So according to Venetian authorities, they didn't deserve protection because they weren't Muslims, that Venetians were protecting Ottoman subject. And we will see that, for example, Simon Contarini indicated many of them arrived in Istanbul dressed half Spanish, half Turkish way. And we will see that Ottoman Sultan also sent 3 different diplomatic missions to Venice in order to ask for safe passage. One of them was Haji Ibrahim, and in the letter, Sultan indicated that Venetian authorities didn't let Moriscos to pass through Venice to Istanbul because they were wearing Christian outfit. Exactly, that's the sentence, and saying that since they had to leave Spain and French territory as Christian, they didn't have enough time to wear their Muslim clothes. And in Venice, they had problems. They couldn't pass to Istanbul, and Sultan asked Venetian authorities to create safe passage to treat them as Muslim subject of the Sultan. In 1614, Sultan sent Hüseyin Çavuş, although the main issue were about pirates activities in Adriatic. Hüseyin Çavuş indicated the Grand Vizier also ordered him to mention about Moriscos situation and ask for safe passage again. But one of the most important mission was by Moriscos Süleyman. According to letter, this letter that Sultan sent to Venetian authorities, Moriscos still face some problems in Venice, and Sultan asked for safe passage, indicating that helping those Moriscos not only create a good relation between Serenissima and Sublime Porte, but also it will be a good relation between whole Muslim population and Venice. However, during his stay in Venice, Suleiman indicated, apart from the letter, he wanted to give a memorial which indicate an incident that happened in Venice. So the letter, his memorial, show how Moriscos managed to become a part of Mediterranean. According to letter, 3 Moriscos women with their husband, they traveled with a French vessel from Tunisia to Istanbul. But during the journey, the captain of vessel killed their husband, raped woman, and since he was afraid to go to Istanbul, he took them to Venice. And he managed to keep them in Venice, indicating them one of them, his Christian wife, who was converting to Islam. But in the memorial, they also had, Suleiman has also a letter regarding this situation, and the letter already shows that their trans-imperial connection. According to letter, they learned about this situation through a French commander in Venice, who informed Jerome Henriques in Marsilia. The community in Marsilia wrote a letter to community in Istanbul, Morisco community. They meet Şeyh Islam. Şeyh Islam informed Ottoman Sultan regarding the situation, and Sultan sent a representative to Venice. So through all letters, we can say that Moriscos were contacted with Venice through French commander, then community in Marsilia, Tunisia, Istanbul, and Venice. And the letter creates so much problem in Venice that the authorities try to interrogate the whole situation, and Venetian authorities wrote 3 different letters. One as a reply to Sultan letter, one as a reply to memorial of Suleiman, and they also sent another letter to Baylo in Istanbul saying that if Suleiman arrived to Istanbul and meet with Sultan before you, he can say many bad things about Venice, so you should first meet Grand Vizier and Sultan before Suleiman arrived and inform him that Venetians already solved the problem and they will guarantee safe passage for Moriscos. Do I have time or?
Yes, maybe 10 minutes maximum.
And if we come to Istanbul, now if we come to Istanbul part, the settlement in Istanbul also create a problem, not with local communities, but with also Christian authorities like French ambassador, Venetian or ambassador of England in the Galata. As I say, the first group arrived in 1493, but main groups arrived after expulsion. They settled in Galata, which was a cosmopolitan neighborhood with Christian and Jewish population, which it was a European part, which for Moriscos is similar, because they could easily integrate, they could do their merchant activity, but at the same time, it was an Ottoman policy as well, because at that time, Ottoman authorities trying to change the European aspect of Galata into Arabic aspects. So they deliberately settled Moriscos in Galata. They were the people who settled in Galata, they were diverse origin, merchant, artisans, soldiers. They were from Zaragoza, Aragon, Puebla, Valencia. There's one letter that's sent by Moriscos to his wife in Spain, and he mentioned that he met many Moriscos from small village in Aragon, in Zaragoza. I'm not going to go in detail. They were also intermediaries between Ottoman and Dutch representatives who were trying to get capitulation for Dutch Empire. In Istanbul, conversion and identity become main aspect of Moriscos settlement because they didn't present themselves as Muslim. They present themselves as Christian who reconverted to Islam because that will give them some privileges. For example, there is one Ottoman document from 1605 or 7, I don't remember perfectly. Sultan Ahmed indicated ordered the Ottoman authorities to give some clothes and money to this new converted population. As I said, conversion to Islam was a privilege to get some gain. For example, there is one petition by Ali and his brother Ibrahim, indicating that 14 members of them, including their children and wife, arrived in Istanbul. They embraced Islam, converted to Islam, were circumcision, and since they converted, they were allowed to settle in Hacı Bayram Kafrani neighborhood, acquire property, and lived happily under Sultan protection. So, in this part of Istanbul, we can see that Moriscos were not subject of Spanish kingdom anymore. They were newly converted Muslim population of Sultan. But of course, their conversion also created a problem with local population. Grand Vizier Nasuh Pasha and Kadı of Pera, the main supporter of Moriscos, allowed them to settle in Galata and give them some properties that were already belonged to Jewish population in the region. Moriscos were offered some grand amount of money to Ottoman authorities in order to convert some churches and synagogues. Edward Grimson indicated they were trying to do the same to Christian population in Pera as Spanish did to them. In 1612, they asked Grand Vizier to occupy some buildings and houses in Pera, and Grand Vizier already granted them this right to basically occupy those places. This was their interaction with local population. So we can see that Moriscos were not just exiles who settled there. They were trying to put their presence. They were trying to convert sacred places to their Muslim identity. They were merchants. There are many sources that Italian reports indicate that Moriscos become competitive merchants in Mediterranean. But at the same time, they had problems with foreign ambassadors. So whenever they had problems, they could basically communicate, they could basically appeal to Ottoman authorities, and this creates many problems. For example, in 1579, Ottoman Grand Vizier sent 12 Moriscos to French ambassador in Spain, in Istanbul, and indicating that many of their co-religions, when they were passing through France, they had many harassment, many problems, and Grand Vizier asked French ambassador to reply this request. We had the same in 1612. Grand Vizier Nasuh Pasha, Grand Vizier Khalil Pasha asked French ambassador again to reply this request because many of them had problem in France, and French ambassador indicated France already protected Moriscos, and he gave a testimony of one of Moriscos in Marsilia who was arrested, but later he was released through help with French authorities. We have seen with Bailo, Venetian authorities, many of them constantly applied to Sultan and Grand Vizier, indicating that they had many problems through Venice when they were passing through Venice, and requested their co-religions to be released in Venice. For example, one of them in 1635, Venetian authorities captured one of the ships in Mediterranean, thinking that it was a pirate ship. They sank the ship, and most of the people who died in that ship were actually Moriscos merchants from Tunisia. This led Moriscos in Chios and Istanbul to appeal Ottoman Sultan, indicating that they will support or finance Ottoman fleet if the fleet goes to Crete and try to conquer that. We have the same with English ambassador. Venetian Baino Almoro Nani reported the same happened with English ambassador. The English, they captured 2 ships traveling from Tunisia to Livorno, but many of them were Moriscos merchants and with merchandise. So Moriscos appealed to Grand Vizier and Ottoman authorities, and Ottoman Grand Vizier basically, the document is long, but the Grand Vizier asked for English ambassador to pay what Moriscos lost in that cargoes. In Istanbul, the only good relation between Moriscos and foreign ambassador was with Dutch ambassador Cornelius Haga, who arrived in Istanbul in order to get capitulation for Dutch Empire. And in one of his documents, he said that Ottoman authorities were getting opinion of Moriscos and Jews regarding to Dutch Empire, and Moriscos were talking highly in favor of Dutch Empire. And one of the main actors in this interaction is Dr. Perez Bolhaj, a Moriscos who was in Istanbul. He treated the sick daughter of Sheikhul Islam, so he had personal connection with Sheikhul Islam, and he sent a letter to Cornelius Haga saying that Moriscos were always supporting Dutch Empire. The other day, Sheikhul Islam asked me my opinion about Dutch Empire, and I said they were helping us, sending ships to help Moriscos. And Perez Bolhaj basically telling Dutch ambassador saying that you should meet with Sheikhul Islam. I already talked about your request, so he is open to meet you and talk with you. And just last part before finishing, their settlement. I'm not going to go into detail to North Africa, but there are 4 letters from Ottoman authorities to St. Algiers and Tunisia, authorities in Tunisia, requesting the integration and settlement of Moriscos, indicating that they are Muslim subject, they should be treated as the same Muslim subject in the region, they should be exempted from taxes for 5 years. If there is a position, Moriscos scholars also should be considered for that position. They shouldn't be excluded because they came from Spain, because in North Africa they had some problems. Many North African authorities indicating that these religious posts cannot be given Moriscos because they are outsiders. But Sultan, in his letters, clearly say that they were Muslim subject, they should be treated in the same way. In Anatolia, we have one document regarding settlement of Moriscos from Tunisia to Eastern Anatolia, which Abdel Jalil Temimi and Mikel de Epaza already wrote 2 articles about that. But recently I discovered one document to send from 1613 from Ottoman Sultan to Kadovs in Thessaloniki, indicating that there's already a community in Salonika, Moriscos community, and they send representatives to Istanbul asking for settlement. So the Sultan ordered that the agriculturist workers should be sent to Eastern Anatolia, the same place that Moriscos settled already, but the merchant should stay in Thessaloniki. They have right to buy houses and shops. They shouldn't be disturbed. They shouldn't be harassed. And the copy of same document were sent to Chios, Bosnia, Bursa, indicating that agriculture's workers should be sent to Eastern Anatolia, but merchants should stay in the region. So if we come to conclusion, Moriscos create an agency, a displaced status community constructed Trans-Imperial network. From their coordination with Kılıçdaroğlu Pasha to their appeal to Sultan, from their intelligence operation to their lobbying for the Dutch ambassador, they were actively architect of Trans-Imperial relations. However, their fortune depended on household politics. Whoever have power and support them, Moriscos were trying to connect with this power. They were actors in liquid frontier. They put the sovereignty, faith, and belonging were negotiated rather than fixed concepts. I don't know if you can see the picture, but it's mainly the connection that Moriscos created. Here I put their settlement, their interaction with foreign ambassador, their spy networks, everything in order to show that they were not, the Moriscos problem was not a Spanish problem, it was a Mediterranean connection. It was a global diplomacy, global pressure in Granada or Valencia triggered the Trans-Imperial interaction, which reached Istanbul, Venice, Paris, Amsterdam, even London. From letters in Marsilia to their contact in Istanbul, the petition to Sultan al-Shaykh Islam is a perfect example of how local problems transform into an imperial diplomacy. And lastly, as I say, they were people who can move between Christian and Muslim territories, who can present themselves as Christian or Muslim. And the picture shows that all the connection or report regarding Moriscos. While Granada, I mean, in this case, Granada represents all Moriscos population, was main point. Istanbul was another main point, who had connection with Candia, Chios, Bursa, Zante, Corfu, Napoli, or Mantua, Venice, regarding Moriscos interaction, regarding Moriscos problem. Thank you very much.